whether you're a group of 20 or like I worked with the CEO of a $1.5 billion business last year, your voice, what you say and how you say it has such a huge impact, but we're not exactly sure what the impact is. We know it's going to have an impact. So the most important thing you have as a leader is feedback loops. It's like that innovation, right? You're almost prototyping. Let me prototype what I say, and then let me quickly get the data to say what the impact is, and then let me adjust that prototype. Like, I think prototyping has a real space in leadership for people that really want to evolve as leaders.
Pete Steinberg, welcome to my show, 20-Minute Leaders. I'm so excited to have you with us all today. So thank you very much for being here.
I'm excited to be here too.
Well, talking for 20 minutes about leadership and innovation, but in the context of your background and the things in your experience that have inspired you, that's something I'm truly excited about. And I'm particularly excited for this one because you have extensive experience in bringing leadership and innovation in the context of sports on an international level. I believe having won more than 11 national championships in the context of women's rugby.
That's right.
And rugby specifically is a sport that is dear to my heart. I've never played it myself, but I've been playing some minor role in the development of the rugby ecosystem here in Israel. And so
That's great.
I appreciate a lot of the fundamentals of what it is to be on a rugby team. Pete, over to you. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how leadership and innovation on a general level, how does that tie into your experience with coaching in sports?
Sure. I mean, I think so first of all, like I'd say that sports actually not a place I like to go for an analogy for business. So that might be a weird way to start this. And the reason why I don't really like it is because our metrics are wrong. So what we do is we look at the score at the end and we say winning team, good team, losing team, bad team. When actually the winning team may not be a good team. They might just have the best players. They may not have even played that well, but they were just better. And the losing team could have the better team because they maximize their potential. So I think we have a metric problem when it comes to sport. I actually think we have a metric problem in leadership as well. But I think rugby is a little different. And the reason why rugby is a little bit different is because of the way you have to lead as a coach. So in the 2017 World Cup, we were playing in the semifinals against New Zealand. It was the first time the US women had made the semifinals for 20 years. Very, very important game. And I'm up in the stands. And so therefore the players have to do everything themselves. They have to understand and implement the strategy. They've got to decide on tactics. They have to deal with conflict. They have to do leadership. They have to problem solve. They have to do all these things on their own. So I think in rugby, if you're a senior leader, you have to do all of those things, right? If I'm the CEO of a company, I have to enable my team to run the business. It is not my job to run the business. So I think rugby in particular, because of it's such a player-centered sport and the role of the coach is actually a great analogy. So therefore, the things that I learned as a rugby coach on how to empower my team, how to create a culture, and how to help them come up with new things, I think is important. And then the second thing I'd say, which was really linked to innovation, and I was fortunate enough to have a consulting business and coach rugby together for 20 years, so I took things back and forth. But when you're coaching the US team in the rugby world, you do not have many advantages, right? Like you don't have as much money as the traditional rugby countries. You don't have as many players. Your players aren't as skilled. And so for you to be able to compete, it forces you to be innovative. You can't play the same game as England. You can't play the same game as New Zealand. What you have to do is you have to find a way to play a game. You have to innovate and play the game differently if you want to compete.
I want to go back for a minute to what you said in the beginning on the metrics question, because you said something that I think may raise some eyebrows and is not necessarily intuitive. The winning team is not necessarily the better team. And that obviously means that we have to translate and define what is better. So what is a better team for you?
So to me, a great team is a team that maximizes its potential, right? That does everything it can to be as good as it can be. And I'll give you an example. In 2004, the Penn State women, I was coaching them. We won our third national championship. We were the best team in the country. In 2005, we lost to Stanford by 40 points. Now, to understand, for people that don't understand rugby, 40, think about it like it's a football score, an American football score. 40 points is a blowout. So the reigning national championships lost by 40 points. And so we came back from that competition and we said, all right, we have to look, for us to close that gap, we have to look at everything that we do. We have to look at how we select, we have to look at how we train, we have to look at how we recruit, we have to look at everything. And we did that and we went into the playoffs and we were like winning games, close games, pulling things off at the end. And Stanford was beating everybody by 60 points. Everybody. And so we went into the final, no one expected us to have a chance. And we lost that game. I think it was like 17-14. Stanford scored with 5 minutes to go. So they won. But we absolutely maximized. We played as good as we could be. They had a woman called Jess Watkins, who was just a phenomenal rugby player. She went on to play for the US. She's also an astronaut. So she's like a little bit, like she has a PhD in geology. She's a big overachiever, but an amazing woman, an amazing player. She was just better than everyone we had. But we played the best we could be. We were as good as we possibly, and I could argue, I think, we made Stanford not be as good. Like if Stanford had played as good as they could be, then they would have beaten us easily. But we made them not play as well. So on that game, we were the better team. We maximized our potential and they didn't, even though we didn't win the game.
And so when you're translating that to business outcomes, for us, it's all about, I'm the CEO of an early stage company. For us, it's all about KPIs, milestones, success rates.
Right.
Did you close the contract? Does the AI model do what it's supposed to do? And the distinction from the journey to the result is a complex one for many young entrepreneurs to work through. Now, I know that you work with many senior executives, but with, when you're looking at it, it's the startup early stage ecosystem.
Yep.
How do I react to this as a CEO myself? How do I balance these ideas?
Well, you said something that was really important, Michael, is you said, hey, the journey from sort of like action to impact is really complex. And in fact, what I would argue is that particularly in startups, when you're going into new areas, you are doing things that are unknown. And when you're doing things that are unknown, and this is something that is really important in innovation, is what you need to do is you need to experiment, right? So you can't have certainty that if I do A, B is, if we do this, then we're going to sell more. We think, maybe, like we don't know, right? But we think if we do this, then that will make a little bit of interest in our clients, then our clients will so that ambiguity of action and impact means that if you only focus on the impact, if that's the only metric you're having, then you're not actually rewarding the right people. And so I actually think, and I've done a little bit of work in the startup world, and I believe one of the reasons why the failure rate in startups is so high is that we're so focused on the impact and not focused on the actions. And if we can help CEOs have better actions and really focus on them developing their leadership, because startups they all start with good ideas. They all start with very credible opportunities for a business. So why do so many of them fail? And I would say so many of them fail because the leaders in that startup are not focused on the right actions, and we're focused too much on the impact.
Now, when you say the right actions, it sounds to me like those actions are both the actions that they take as leaders, but they're also the way in which the organization talks internally, behaves internally. It's about the rhythm that it works in.
Right. Yeah. I think I'd say so we need to drive sales. So what we do is we hire more salespeople. Well, that's probably a way to drive sales. But if you are talking in your marketplace the right way, hiring more salespeople is not going to, you're not going to get the return on investment, right? So the way that you talk, and if you're not linked where your salespeople are really connected with the people that are doing the technology, right? So the salespeople understand how to talk about the technology, then you're also not going to be successful. And if your leaders aren't rewarding people and recognizing people in the right way, you're still not going to be successful. So just hiring salespeople is a piece of the solution, we think. But there's so much more to it for a really high-performing organization. And I think that the challenge at startups is that there's very little leadership development, right? There's very little developmental opportunities for leaders to really think about. Even look, you've got an organization of 5, no problem. You got an organization of 25, you can still manage that. You get to an organization of 100. Now, there's something called the Dunbar number, and the Dunbar number is some research that a social anthropologist did actually on gorillas, and said, look, when the troops of gorillas get to about 150, they split. And doing some more research, they said, yeah, it's kind of the same. Once you get to an organization more than 100, I actually don't feel connected to everyone. I feel connected to a subgroup. And so moving from your organization from 20 to 100 to 300 in your startup journey is really complex. But there's almost no support in how you actually need to be very different as a leader when you have 200 people in your organization than when you have 20.
I love that. I mean, actually, I know we're just about 20 people now in my organization, and I've been working with a coach over the last 6 months or so on my leadership skills, and
that's great.
It's been jaw-dropping for me to see the impact of, first of all, to realize the impact of my actions, and then to realize that me shifting my perspective and my communication and my behavior, the impact that has on the 20 people immediately is pretty incredible.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because, whether you're a group of 20 or like I worked with the CEO of like a $1.5 billion business like last year, your voice, what you say and how you say it has such a huge impact, but we're not exactly sure what the impact is. We know it's going to have an impact. So the most important thing you have as a leader is feedback loops. It's like that innovation, right? You're almost prototyping. Let me prototype what I say, and then let me quickly get the data to say what the impact is, and then let me adjust that prototype. Like, I think prototyping has a real space in leadership for people that really want to evolve as leaders.
Absolutely. What got you into rugby in the first place?
Well, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not from the US, right? So I'm originally from the UK. And I grew up and I played rugby in the UK. I was a relatively mediocre rugby player. Like, most of my friends are like, you coached at the Olympics? Like, I grew up with, like, you weren't that good at rugby. But my dad was American. And so I thought, well, I'm a pretty mediocre rugby player. My dad was American. America has a pretty mediocre rugby team. Maybe I can come to grad school in the US and play for the US. That was sort of my goal. And so I actually went to Penn State to go to grad school to play rugby. I stepped on campus and I found out that only undergraduates can play. And the reason why only undergraduates can play is that is college is where most Americans pick up and develop the sport. And if you let grad students play, your teams will be filled with like Australians and British and French and South Africans. And so I found myself at the age of 23 not being able to play. So that's when I started to coach. And I became a much better coach than I ever was a player. And then here's the interesting, Michael, this is like one of these things. So the experiment in my PhD program failed. I would have to start again. I didn't want to do that. I dropped out of my PhD program. It was in geochemistry. I went to the business school, got a job in the business school in executive education, sat in the back of the classroom while professors from around the world did short courses for business executives. That was my business education. And then in 2001, start up my own business to support my rugby habit, because you can't go and spend 4 months at the Olympic training site training for the Olympics with a normal job. And at that point, had this very serendipitous merge of like, oh my gosh, this leadership work I've been doing and this elite rugby work I'm doing is kind of the same thing, and put me in this like really unique space of being able to take business concepts to sport and to be able to bring elite sports concepts to business.
That's so cool. I mean, I think that's just
all from the failure. If my PhD experiment had worked, Michael, I would not be talking to you.
Maybe you would have been a geochemist right now and
No, I would be a geochemist. I'd probably be a professor somewhere, like unhappy. Like, I don't know if I'd be unhappy, but it's just funny. Like, I look at that and I've had such an amazing professional career from that failure that I had, that it's like one of those things I like to talk about. Because I think people, especially early in their career, don't like failure. And I'm like, no. I learned, and by the way, so much I took from my PhD program. Like, I read scientific journals about the work that I do. I bring like a knowledge of data and how to look at data and graphs and things like that. There were things that I took away from that failure, but if I hadn't had that failure, I wouldn't be where I am today.
I love it. when you started coaching in university, was that was that intuitive for you? Was it sort of like, oh, this is, what was the underlying conditions that enabled you to realize that you're a better coach than a player, perhaps? But it sounds like it came pretty intuitively for you.
So I when I started coaching, I had a lot of rugby knowledge, but I don't think I understood learning and change. And so what I did was I took my scientific background and I really dove into like, what does the science say about skill development? What does the science say about mindset? And what does the science say about change? And that really allowed me to go on this journey of continuous improvement and reflection. I think there's probably two things that like really helped me be a good rugby coach. One is I don't have a huge ego. So it was never about me. It was all about the players and about their experience and them being able to do what they did. And then the second thing is, for whatever reason, I love learning and I love growth. So I was asked recently on another podcast, because I'm doing a bunch of these for the book, like, what makes you a good coach? I'm like, oh, I'm not a good coach now. I'll be a good coach tomorrow. And yesterday I was a terrible coach. And so that continuous growth, and it's exactly the same. The best leaders I worked with are the leaders just say that, like, leadership is a journey, not a destination. I just want to be better tomorrow than I am today. And as long as someone says that, then they're going to be a great leader. So I think that continuous improvement growth journey is the thing that really helped me become successful as a coach.
I love it. If there was one thing that you would have to recommend to young CEOs of young companies, so let's take a average of 28-year-old CEO,
okay,
or a 20-person Series A stage startup.
Okay.
Number
one thing,
one or two things.
Probably humility would be the number one. I think one of the challenges you have when you're, early stage startup is that you got that role because you had some insight and some expertise that is useful in the market. And to be able to get the funding that you need to position yourself as this super smart, super insightful person. So someone's going to give you money. Right. And so that's sort of like an outward view that you have to have. But when you come back into your organization, you need to have humility, which is, I actually don't know everything. Like when you're talking to the VCs, you kind of have to position yourself as like, I know everything. I'm going to provide you with almost some certainty, right? The funding that you're going to give me is going to be returned. Like, everyone knows that isn't true, but you've got to at least present that.
Right.
I think that humility and that openness to ambiguity is probably the most important thing, because humility leads to both insight and learning. It leads to insight because people will engage with you because you're not the expert, and they'll be open to engage with you because you want to learn. And because people are engaging with you, you'll gain insight. And because you'll gain insight, you'll grow and change as a leader. And the reason why that's important is that no one who's got a 20-person startup wants it to be a 20-person startup. They want to be CEO when it's 1,000-person organization. And the problem that you have is you have to go through so many transitions on that journey that if you don't have humility and if you don't have that learning focus and that continuous change, you're going to find yourself kicked out. Because you're going to still, when it's 200 people, you're going to lead it like it's 20 people. When it's 1,000, you're going to lead it like it's 200. So I think that concept of humility and openness to change and that openness to being wrong, like those sorts of things, I think are going to be really critical as you go through the career of your startup.
I love it. Peter, I really want to thank you for taking this time with me, and congratulations on the new book coming out and everything that you've done and are continuing to do. So thank you for this really great and fun conversation. And I hope that everybody who tuned in also enjoyed it as much as I did. So thank you so much.
No, I love the conversation, Michael.
Thank you.